How's it going, everybody? Bryan Alvarez here on Wrestling Observer Live. We're here every day, Monday through Friday, noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, Sundays, 3 Pacific, 6 Eastern. Got a lot to talk about here today on the show. Dave Meltzer will be joining us in the second segment of the program. Got a lot to talk about, including, unfortunately, more bad news here today. This from Kurt Beyer, the son of the Destroyer, Dick Beyer. It is with a very heavy heart to let you know that Dad, a.k.a. the Destroyer, Dr. X, Dick Beyer, coach, passed away shortly past noon today. He was in bed at home, was surrounded by all of his children and wife as he slipped peacefully away. I'll have more to share later. Wanted you to hear this sad news from me first. Thoughts and prayers are most welcome at this time. Peace. That's from Kurt Beyer. We'd heard a few days ago that Dick Beyer was not in good shape. Heard he had been moved into hospice, and not a lot of people move into hospice and then move out, unfortunately. And that is the story there. We'll talk to Dave about the Destroyer, one of the most legendary wrestlers in the history of Japan, actually, and long career here in the United States as well. And if I recall correctly, there was a show very, very recently where the Destroyer sent in a video for everybody to watch in Japan. So we'll talk about his career. Rest of the show today, we've got a lot of other news as well. Jushin Liger, another Japanese legend, announcing he'll be retiring at the Tokyo Dome in January. He's going to be going on a tour all over the world, having some final matches. Basically said that, hey, if you're not going to be the champion, what's the point? He just had a match with Taiji Ishimori at the anniversary show, did not win the title, and made the announcement. 54 years old, can still go at 54, but hey, you don't want to go until you can't go anymore. So this will be his final year. We got Jeff Jarrett being added to the WWE creative team, Jim Ross leaving WWE, SmackDown ratings, and much, much more. We'll kick it off after the break. Wrestling Observer Live. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com. A lot of news to get into here today. Dave will be joining us to talk the life of the Destroyer here in the next segment on the show. As noted also in the opening segment, Jushin Thunder Liger, another all-time Japanese legend, announced this morning he will retire in January. Made the announcement during a press conference. Liger, 54, said he hopes to wrestle all around the world until the next Tokyo Dome card in January, where he will retire. He will be out during the New Japan Cup Tour, as he will be in Ireland. Also hoped he would be able to wrestle at the G1 Supercard event next month at Madison Square Garden. Maybe he'll be in town for Black Label Pro on April 5th. I haven't heard. That would be pretty cool. Morin Keiichi Yamada, he originally wanted to join New Japan's dojo straight out of high school. Failed to meet their height requirement at the time. That sucks. Traveled to Mexico, trained there, till he was asked back to train at the dojo. Eventually had his debut match March 3rd. Won the New Japan or Young Lion Cup in 1986. Went on his excursion. Traveled all over the place. Wrestled for Stampede in the famed Dungeon. Returned 1987. And debuted as Jushin Liger April 24, 1989. New Japan World Championship Wrestling. NXT, of all places. He had one match in NXT, and just very recently, surprise win over Taiji Ishimori led to a title match at the 47th anniversary show, where he failed. After which he said, if you can't be the champion, what are you even doing this for? So, it's going to be a retirement tour, capping it off at one of the Tokyo Dome show. May very well be that one of the Dome shows is a tribute to Jushin Liger Dome show. So that's the story. The end of the career of Jushin Liger. Sad. Dude could still go at 54. Mike, I presume you have a couple thoughts on this.
It was a craptastic day in Japanese wrestling for two dramatically different reasons. The sensational, intelligent Destroyer, who, as Dave will tell you and as he will write about in The Observer, a cultural icon of the highest degree in Japan, a wrestling deity there. An incredibly intelligent man outside of the ring, a incredibly gregarious, I think that would be a good word, the personality for days, could talk for days, just a warm, awesome guy. Jim Valley, I'm sure, is going to talk about him a lot on his show because he would always go to the Cauliflower Alley Club. Just an absolute legend, and as you mentioned in the opening, just recently They had the Abdullah the Butcher retirement and Baba memorial celebration, and Dick Beyer sent in words and a letter and a large plaque there, and it just an absolutely epic star. Jushin Liger, in a different way, the spiritual successor for junior heavyweights and characters to Tiger Mask in some ways, just everyone's favorite wrestler. When he made his appearance in NXT, and anytime Liger is anywhere in ROH or anywhere, he's just an incredible, an amazing superstar that kind of defines an era. Was the most recognizable face and character of a time when New Japan, their junior heavyweight division, was special. I mean, there's a lot of words you could use to describe it, but special, I think, would be a perfect one. Shinjiro Otani, Koji Kanemoto, El Samurai, Chris Benoit as Wild Pegasus, Black Tiger, Eddie Guerrero. Their junior heavyweight scene throughout the 90s was just absolutely epic, and there's nothing he couldn't do. There was, at the beginning of his career, there would be a lot of people that looked at him and went, if it wasn't for the outfit, he wouldn't have been able to get over. That's not true. Over the years, the outfit was a great start, but not everyone could have done what Jushin Liger did. And even to this day, when you look at Liger, 50-something years old, is still in incredibly amazing shape for his age. The fact that he could still do anything with anybody in the ring. He may not do everything he could do back in the day, but he can still almost do it all, and he's still in good shape. And remember, this was a guy that came back from a brain tumor in the 90s. I think it was the early 2000s, whenever he had the brain tumor that set him 96. Out for a while. Yeah, that looked like he could end his career, and he came back from that, and just an integral part of that promotion and being able to find talent for the junior heavyweight division and for all the things that he did. He's going to be a presence that is going to be missed on these shows.
Sports here says, would you bring me the paper from the pumpkin and your room phone, please? You've been texting the show a lot when I'm number one on your text dial. Let's go to the phones. You're on the air. What's up?
Hey, guys. It's Kenny in Myrtle Beach. I wanted to comment something that I've been wanting to actually say this for a while, this whole Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey, Charlotte situation. And everybody's complaining about, it should be a three-way, it should be a two-way. There's one important factor that everybody is missing out on.
Everybody?
Yes, everybody. Okay. This match is going on last. Nobody's going to care whether it's a three-way or a two-way, because nobody's going to give a crap about the match, because by that point, they'll have all been there for 7.5 hours, and will just want to go home.
That's your prediction for the main event of WrestleMania?
Yeah, it happened last year.
Well, it happened last year because it was Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar in a match where they built up everybody hating both guys.
Yeah, but it's also, I honestly do believe that the length of the show was a killer. And I'm saying that as somebody who wasn't even at the event. I was just watching on TV, and I was exhausted.
Well, you may be right, my friend. We'll find out. I think that if you're expecting no heat for Becky Lynch versus Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte, I believe that you will be surprised. I do think it's going to be a heated match. Jim Ross announced in his podcast leaving WWE at the end of the month. Said he recently spoke to Vince McMahon, mutually agreed to part ways, noting he would not be part of the WWE after his contract expires at the end of the month. Quote, I still want to play the game. I still want to stay busy. I will not be returning to WWE after the 29th of March. Said he will be moving on in a positive way, has no regrets about his run in the WWE, saying the smartest move was joining the company in 1993. Also said he didn't think he would be out of work long. In and out of the company for the last several decades. Last appearance, part of a guest panel prior to the Greatest Royal Rumble event in Saudi Arabia last month. Everybody asked if he's going to AEW. I don't know. But I do know that if I were running AEW, I absolutely would bring in Jim Ross. I absolutely would bring in Arn Anderson. I don't know what role necessarily I would have both of them do. But as far as people that know a lot about the business, not even a lot. That's underselling it. Guys that have been around the business for decades, 70s, 80s. I mean, it doesn't matter what the modern style of wrestling is. There's still the basic psychology of professional wrestling, booking professional wrestling, ideas behind matches, no matter what kind of high spots or lack of high spots you have in a match. Both guys would be super valuable to AEW, and I'd hire them. So, we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily want Jim Ross to do announcing, but to have him there to help with the show, to help with talent, to help with the announcers, including Alex Marvez, who is no stranger to being behind a microphone since he does a daily radio show for the NFL Network. But as far as calling, or the Sirius NFL radio, as far as calling wrestling, though, I mean, he doesn't know much about it, and he's going to have to get better at it. And who better to have at your side than Jim Ross? You know, Lance Russell's not here. Gordon Soley's not here. But Tony Schiavone is, but he's under contract to MLW. So who does that leave? Who else is out there? Jim Ross is the perfect guy, and times have changed. You want to put a new mark on things. So, again, I don't know if I necessarily want him out there. I don't know if I certainly don't want him out there as the number one guy, but to have him play a part, I mean, yeah, these guys aren't going to be out of jobs for very long.
We got this person here saying, WrestleMania 36 announced to take place in Tampa, with it taking place at the Raymond James Stadium. Do you think they should feature Kyrie as part of the show and utilize the ship as part of her entrance?
Well, of course.
I think they should have Kyrie on every show, actually. And yes, they could have a boat. Back in a moment.
No, there was a ship.
With Dave, Wrestling Observer Live. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com. Dave Meltzer joining us here today. Dave, just wraps up a new Observer, and word out that the Destroyer, Dick Beyer, has passed away. And Dave, tell us about the Destroyer.
Oh, God. There's so much that I could say about him. I mean, Destroyer was one of the greatest wrestlers of the 60s and 70s. He took as soon as he took the mask, he became a big superstar in Los Angeles. He held the world title there 3 times. And he and Ray Stevens were pretty much considered the 2 best workers of the 60s. He mostly wrestled as a heel. He got over gigantic in Japan. His match with Ricky Dozan in 1963 is still by far the most watched pro wrestling match, probably live, in the history of the world. Not just, even though it was only in Japan, it did a 64 rating in Japan, so it was a little over 60 million viewers. It peaked at well over 70 million viewers, which there's never been a live pro wrestling match viewed by that many people in the world that I've ever heard of.
I don't think there ever could be again.
I don't think that. With Worldwide and things like that, with wrestling, because of the population of the world, I think it's possible. It's probably unlikely. It never could happen in Japan, though, or anything, and certainly you'd never have 70 million or 60 million viewers for a pro wrestling match in the United States. That's never going to happen again. But and it was the most watched television show at that point in Japan ever, and for decades. Even when I would go there in the 80s, it was still second to the Olympics in Tokyo, and it's now around 10th or 12th because there's a lot of national soccer games or baseball games, things like that have in Olympics and things like that have beaten it in recent years. But he ended up living in Japan for 6 years. He was a star on the top-rated sitcom, or not sitcom, it's actually a variety show, a comedy variety show. And so he lived there from 73 to 79. He was the top foreign babyface. I would say, with no reservation, that the Destroyer was the greatest non-Mexican masked wrestler of all time. I don't say American because Rey Mysterio is American, but Rey Mysterio is also Mexican. Dick, you could, if you say the greatest masked wrestler, you'd probably say Santo and Rey Mysterio and Mil Mascaras, and Dick would be right in there with them, but he's not Mexican. We used to see him Cauliflower Alley every year. He was really, really good friends with Mike Tenay, who's one of my best friends. So, I saw Dick all the time. Bryan wrestled in front of Dick once in 2001.
That's right.
Yeah.
Battle Royal.
Yeah. And,
Dave,
go ahead.
Can you kind of just try to put upon people what kind of cultural icon that Beyer was in Japan? Because I saw it's written somewhere, it was basically if the Sharp brothers and Dick Beyer, if that and the Sharp, all that, if that was about revenge.
Luthez, Freddie Blassie, there were a lot of them, but I would say, then Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen, who came later. I think that Stan Hansen would be more known to modern fans, but as far as Luthez was really, really big. The Sharp brothers were really, really big as well. But Dick lived there. Dick was in there, and he had his feud with Mascaras. He feud with Abdul the Butcher. He used to team with Baba. He had a big feud with Baba before they became tag team partners. He was definitely up there. He was certainly in the 60s and 70s in Japanese culture. He was a household name in the way Hulk Hogan and The Rock are here. Maybe I don't know about bigger, but as easily as big, for sure as big. Again, it's been decades, and if you went into Japan now, older people would all know who he is, but younger people, if they weren't wrestling fans, I don't think that they would know him so much now. But he continued to go to Japan until I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, he would bring amateur wrestlers to Japan every summer. He would always take a summer trip to Japan, because after he retired from wrestling, he became a school teacher, coach in Akron, New York, coached swimming and wrestling and football and things like that. And then during the summer vacation, he would go to Japan, which, and even when, until he was he was probably around 60 when he retired. And until then, even when he was a school teacher, after he got out of wrestling full time, he would still go every summer and work a tour for All Japan Pro Wrestling. So he always went to Japan in the summer. Japan was a huge part of his life, because his family grew up there for several years.
88 years old.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well,
8.5 years old, yeah.
T-shirts and masks that used to be sold in the magazines. Was he one of the first ones to jump on that train?
What?
Like selling his Dr. X T-shirts and then the masks in the magazines?
Yeah, Dr. Destroyer Bubbleheads, and which I actually have one right in front of me.
Awesome.
And the action figures, long before WWE ever did them. Yeah, he was as far as marketing and T-shirts and figures and things like that, which came from Japan. He was the first to bring that to the United States. Yeah.
So you mentioned going to Japan. How long ago was it that he stopped taking his annual vacation?
I don't know, but it's only a couple of years. I would say
that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And he did a thing where, up until his body sort of gave out on him, he was in incredible shape. He did a thing where he climbed, he did some charity thing. It wasn't that many years ago. He was well into his 80s. I remember this when he, climbed the side of a building, which was kind of a big publicity thing. He ran a park golf course, which is it's bigger than miniature golf, but smaller than regular golf, and so he ran that, and he would, go around and meet, people, and it was called the Destroyers Park Golf, so he would sell his souvenirs there, and he was just his daughter runs it now, and he wanted to go to Japan just recently for the Baba show, but he just, that was only a couple of weeks ago, and he couldn't go, but he sent the video in, to talk about Abdullah, and Baba.
How did he look in the video? Because it was very recent.
Well, he was wearing his mask, so it's hard to tell.
Well, yeah, but did he seem like he was healthy? Did you watch it and go, man, this doesn't look good?
He sounded like he was in his 80s.
Yeah. I guess it's the best way to put it. The last time I saw him, which would have been Cauliflower Alley, the last time I went, so I guess it was the year that they inducted me, so that's 2 years ago, I think, a couple of years ago. So you were there too, so, he was having trouble getting around, but, he was 86 years old at the time, or 85, something like that. But he was still, I mean, he was very, very active until later in life, kept himself in great condition. He was a legit, top-tier athlete, an amateur wrestling star, college football star, and when he got into pro, they thought he was too small to be a main event pro wrestler, and so he didn't really make a lot of money until he put the mask on. But once he put the mask on, and he's a super promo. That's the other thing. When I remember, like as a young kid, because I did not see him wrestle. When he came to San Francisco, it was before I lived in San Francisco. But I would get the audio tapes of Los Angeles, and when he was feuding with Freddie Blassie, and man, that guy could promo. I mean, he was one of the best there was at the promos, and I didn't really get to see him wrestle until, I don't know, maybe some stuff in the 70s. I remember him being really, really good, like always good, but I didn't see him in his peak years, in the 60s when, they used to say him and Ray Stevens were the best workers in the country.
So what else do we have in the new issue of The Observer? Just came out.
Oh, man, so much stuff. A lot more on Roman Reigns, Liger's retirement, the death of King Kong Bundy, big story on him. I had so much stuff I had to cut out. There was some because of that. The big story on, the story behind the Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey match and the build to it. And, the coverage of the New Japan anniversary show, UFC, just loaded with news. A lot of WWE business news, lots and lots, salaries of all the top executives and things like that.
What month was that, the 2001 King of Indies?
I don't know, remember now. It was late in the year, though, wasn't it? Like later in the year?
Might have been September.
It was when spawned Ring of Honor was when Gabe Sapolsky and Mark Gentry and Rob Feinstein saw the tape, and they said, look at all these great wrestlers, and
October.
Maybe we could start a promotion. This was like after ECW and WCW died.
Yeah, October. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I just remember because I wrote a big thing on it back in October. I'm trying to find it right now, but some of the things I remembered most about that was Dick Beyer.
Because we were walking around and Dick was there with his mask on and everything, talking to us. Yeah,
I seem to recall we all went into Denny's and he wore his mask in there.
So great.
And,
Oh yeah.
I mean, he wore it a lot at Cauliflower Alley. I think in later years, he'd wear it during the banquets and that sort of thing, but after a while, he's just tired. He took it off. But, he wore that thing all over the place.
Did you know he used to go through customs in Japan with a mask because everyone knew him, so it was never an issue?
Yeah.
Which is actually kind of weird because if you think about it, somebody could, sneak in the country that way.
They could have. Yeah.
But nobody, I never heard anyone did that, but he would do that because he didn't want anyone to see him in Japan without his mask.
Man.
And this was at a time where literally, everyone would know who he is. So it's the Destroyer. It's like, it was acceptable.
Well, we're out of time, Dave. I want to thank you so much for doing the show here today. Back in a moment with more, everybody. Wrestling Observer Live. Back on the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com. So I'm looking through my report from the King of Indies 2001. Mm-hmm. This was the show that was won by the former Bryan Danielson, now Daniel Bryan. And I did, in fact, wrestle in a battle royal on that show. And I hung out with Ed Moretti all weekend. And I was wrong about the Destroyer story. He didn't wear his mask into the restaurant. And it surprised me to see him without his mask on. Because all weekend at the show, at all of the events, everywhere he went, he wore that mask. And after the show, everybody was going to go to an all-night diner, Lions. And so everybody drove there, and we got out of the car, and I looked up, and there was Dick Beyer with no mask on. But he had a briefcase. And so Ed Moretti and I were trying to figure out, because if you're a businessman, you have a briefcase with all your papers.
And your publicity.
But he's a wrestler. So we thought, I bet he's got a briefcase that has nothing but masks in it. And so we spent some time trying to figure out, because we didn't want to ask, do you have your masks in that briefcase, Dick? So we tried to figure out a way to have him reveal it without actually having to ask him. And we were at the diner, and they wouldn't let us in because it was closed. And I told him, I bet if you put that mask on, they'll let us in. And he goes, really? And he starts to bend down towards the briefcase, but then he changed his mind. And so that was my first clue that the masks were in his briefcase. And then later, we were on our way to the airport or something like that, and he was in there with Ed and I. And so I guess Ed figured, I'm going to ask him in such a way that he'll have to reveal it. So he says, I guess he was trying to get into the car or something like that, and the briefcase was there. And Ed Moretti asked him something like, Mr. Beyer, would you like your briefcase? Would you like your masks? And Ed goes, why? Are they in your way? So Ed just shut up, and that was the end of that. So he's an intimidating dude. Even in his, I guess he would have been in his 70s then. But yeah, he was awesome. He had a lot of fun. He watched King of Indies. Apparently he had a lot of fun. I guess like a lot of people think that the older wrestlers, they go to these shows and they see these young guys doing all these high spots at King of Indies and they would hate it. But in fact, like him and Bockwinkel and Red Bastien, they all loved it. So that's the story of the King of the Indies.
So he was just like being a part of things. He was just one of those types of guys, from all reports. I remember interviewing Newton Tatry, who was one of the original, he was the original Mongol, Guido Mongol, and was talking about Mil Mascaras. Guy did the same thing. Even back in the day, had his briefcase and would have all of his, wrestling as the masks in there and the publicity and all that stuff. Had it right there and ready to go just in case it was ever needed for something. But John
it was
Pollock,
needed to get us into Lions, and he didn't do it.
Well, speaking of Lions, John Pollock tweeted something out that I retweeted. He's one of the best Easter eggs on a WCW 2000 event is at Fall Brawl, where the Destroyer is seated in the crowd wearing the mask with his brother Billy Redlines, which is just, it's a great visual. It's just him sitting there. It's just, all of that stuff in Japan about him, that overcoming, it was after World War II when wrestling came in there and became an accepted art form and became something that the Japanese people believed in. And all of it at first was about setting up revenge on the Americans, but getting the revenge and getting their sense of pride back after World War II and doing it, via pro wrestling. That's why Rikidozan was so popular. That's why the Sharp brothers are such iconic figures. That's why the Destroyer is. And then he became a figure because of that series he had with Baba, where if I can't beat you, I'll join you. And then he became a symbol of being able to work together. Number one, obviously, overcoming the Americans and winning and standing on top. But not only that, as far as working with the Americans, and he became the first American babyface. It's just and whether it's there, whether it's in Los Angeles, like Dave was talking about, and I'm sure he's going to write about it, the wars he had, becoming world champion for the WWA, taking George's hair, which I know a lot of people did, but he was one of the ones who did that in a mask versus hair match, and as big as he was, and then his out of wrestling exploits, which Dave talked about a little bit, which you could go on with as far as how educated he was coming out of the college with an education degree, I believe it was, a master's in education. It's just, he was so perfect and well-rounded and such a good guy. Again, try to find, I'm sure somebody out there does, try to find people with stories about how terrible of a person or how much of a prick the Destroyer was. I mean, they're probably going to be few and far between. So it is just a huge, major loss for the professional wrestling business and family.
Let's go to the phones. You're on the air. What's going on?
This is Jim from Virginia. How y'all doing this evening?
Hello, Jim.
You was talking about Dick Beyer, and you mentioned Mil Mascaras. Was there really any real heat between those two, Mascaras and Dick Beyer?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
if there was, I probably would go one way and not the other.
Well, yeah, Jim Valley is probably going to be the one to ask, so I could pass that on to him and Massa. It just, the thing with Mil Mascaras is there are a lot of people who just thought he was a prick and he came across as aloof and all that stuff. But I don't know. Again, I wonder. There probably could have been some, but that probably, again, like Bryan said, probably would have came from one way. Did
you see the ROH ROH show this week where Jay Lethal tore up the fake world title?
No.
That was really good. They was what's his name? The Kingdom, the guy.
Taven.
Yeah, he came out there and he was bragging about how he was the real champion and yada yada yada. And then Grisham came out there, supposed to be Jay Lethal's friend, and they just beat him down. And then when Jay came out there, he beat him up for a while. And then they overpowered him. Then the Lifeblood or this new team for the honor. I can't think of the name of, but they came out there and they ran out the Kingdom, and then Jay Lethal got up, and Tennille Dashwood, who's part of that other group, she gave him a baseball bat. And he stands and looks at it for a while, and then he starts just busting the old belt all to pieces.
The worst. It's a disrespectful belt, though. A secondary world champion?
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out. I want to thank you very much for the call, Jim. It's like they did the thing where Taven came back and he claimed that he was the real world champion. And unlike every other promotion I've ever seen do this, he had no claim to the ROH world title. He just came back with another world title. Claimed he was the world champion. So it was interesting. This person here says, R-Truth said that John Cena is his childhood hero. Isn't Truth 47 and Cena 41? Doesn't WWE check these things before putting it on TV? Well, that's the joke, my friend. R-Truth's gimmick is he's an idiot. Because one day, one time, in one city, he forgot where they were. And so, for the rest of his career, his gimmick is he is a moron.
I still thought
But you know what's funny? I just got to say one thing. Vince loves Truth.
He should.
Loves him.
He should.
I love him.
My God. Awesome. Former NWA World Heavyweight Champion right there. I still thought he did that to play off the Snickers commercial.
No, that was a legitimate mess
I know. And that was it Green Bay or Milwaukee or something like that?
Something like that.
Well, it was like doing the Pretty Ricky thing, and then Vince saw it and then wanted to do that with the thing with the teeth and everything. He has been through some things in WWE, and the fact that he's 47 years old, looks like $1 zillion.
I did laugh when they were doing SmackDown, and he's talking about how John Cena is his childhood hero, and the announcers have to point out that this is stupid. But the announcer said, "I think they're the same age." I thought, no, actually, Truth is much older. He just looks great.
He just looks a ton younger than John does right now, especially with that haircut the last time I saw Cena. But if you gave me that, this is like, for you, I think The Miz and Shane McMahon facing each other at WrestleMania, if they're with each other, then you can't have anything else screwed up. If you gave me John Cena and R-Truth just to get John Cena on the card, and for that sake, just to get R-Truth on the card, I would be completely for that. I would have that would be a fine pro wrestling fun match for me as long as it doesn't go forever.
Listen, I love Truth. I'm fine with John Cena versus Samoa Joe for the U.S. title. I think that's where they're going. Well, that to me is preferable of the two options.
Do you really think they're going in that direction?
Yeah, are you kidding me? On SmackDown, Joe flat out said, I don't give a damn about John Cena after he won the U.S. title in the John Cena Open Challenge. I mean, they couldn't have made it more obvious to me. Okay. Could be wrong, but let's go to the phones. You're on the air. What's up?
Hey, first I wanted to just mention, I was going through some old matches, Mid-South matches from the mid-'80s, and you remember the Fantastics and Midnight Express angle, or the straitjacket angle?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Do I ever.
That clonk.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, that wasn't the first time they did that.
I know, they did it with the Rock and Rolls.
With the Rock and Roll Express in Mid-South.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. I'd have to watch the Mid-South one, because maybe they made it work.
Of course, that was in the straitjacket.
I mean, in theory, it should work, okay? But, when I watched it with the Midnight Express and the Fantastics, when I actually watched it, it was like, you Fantastics could not be bigger geeks.
And here's the thing, too.
You absolute morons.
As a kid at the time who lived through that and remembered watching that, even then, as soon as you saw that this is what it was going, you knew exactly what the end was going to be, and that's if you had never seen the angle before. So it didn't fool anyone, and I think what really made it even worse was the fact that, again, it would have been a fine angle, I guess. Again, the first time they did it, fine, but it was the clonking of the chair against, who was it, Bobby Fulton's head, that's like, Jesus, just brutal.
I mean, the thing that's weird about it is, like, so if you don't know what happened, everybody, there's going to be a match where Jim Cornette's going to be in a straitjacket. And so, allegedly, the Midnight Express are not there. So the Fantastics come out and they've got a straitjacket. And idiot David Crockett is like, hey, can you show me how this straitjacket works? So, in real life, they should say, all right, you numbskull, we're going to put the straitjacket on you. We'll show you how it works. Instead, they're like, okay. And so, they start putting the straitjacket. One guy's putting it on his partner. And he starts putting him in the straitjacket, and David Crockett's like, oh, but what about it? Oh, his arms. They wrap his arms up, so like he's totally trapped in the straitjacket, okay? And then, of course, the Midnight Express shows up, and one of the guys is stuck in a straitjacket. They beat the hell out of him, okay? It's a great idea in theory, but you have to somehow find a way to have the baby faces not look like absolute idiots for doing what they did. And I'm not sure there's a way that you can do that, because that's really stupid. But like the other side of the coin is, I guess you could do it the other way, where like the heels are so stupid that they put each other in the straitjacket. But then, like having baby faces show up and beat up a heel who's trapped in a straitjacket, that's not right either. So it's like a really great idea, but I'm not sure how you can do it. I just can't figure out how you can do it right.
It never works with the heels. It never works with the heels. It would that's the worst, because there's a reason. That's the whole reason you're demonstrating it, is through some, because of something dirty that the heels did, where the manager or one of those guys is going to end up in one of those jackets. So no, it never works the other way.
I may have a solution. I'll talk about it after the break. Wrestling Observer Live. This person here has an idea. Still trying to think about how to make this work. He says, I feel like you could do the straitjacket idea, but you'd have to have like a masked team, like the Killer Bees demonstrating. And then heels come out and they beat up the dude in the straitjacket, but then they take his mask off and it's their own buddy. So something like that. Yeah. Something where like the baby faces look like they're stupid, but in the end they actually outsmarted the heels. So it'd be tough to do, though, because you need like a 6-man masked group against I guess it'd be a masked team versus 3 diabolical heels, where one of them ended up in the mask. It's tough. This wrestling ain't easy. And you watch WWE and it's like, whatever. Just beat him up, pal. Get heat. So, by the way, we got a pay-per-view, speaking of WWE, on Sunday. Fastlane is coming up. We'll go over the full card for that tomorrow. A lot of matches scheduled, including Rey Mysterio Andrade on the pre-show, which I'm hoping actually won't be much of a match, because I want them to set up a match for WrestleMania with the hair and the mask on the line. I think it'd be awesome.
I hate this pay-per-view. I wish they would go back just having the one in February and just having the run and concentrating on the TV leading into the run. Just the fact that they couldn't even get any matches together, a week before the show barely. I mean, that's a great sign right there to get rid of the damn thing.
Well, it's coming up, so we'll talk about it over the next couple of days. I'll be back later on today. Bryan Vinny Show. We'll be talking NXT and everyone's favorite, WWF Superstars of Wrestling 1992. I don't know why, except we all grew up with it. And a lot of other stuff as well, so check it out. Thanks, Mike, as always. Callers and listeners, everybody in the studio. Talk to you again next time. Wrestling Observer Live.